Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, today's meeting is being broadcast live to members of the public. And for those not able to watch live, there's always the webcast that is recorded and available for viewing after today's meeting. I've received apologies from Mr. Page, with Mr. Poland substituting. Welcome. And before we begin, can I remind everyone to turn on their microphones when they wish to speak? Thank you very much. So I'm moving on to item number 1. That's the appointment of chairman. Members are asked to note that I've been appointed chairman of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee in accordance with Rule 6A of the Overview and Scrutiny Procedure Rules, Part 4E of the County Council's Constitution. Thank you. So item 2, which is the appointment of the vice chairman. Can I ask for nominations for the position of vice chair, please? Yes, thank you. I have a seconder for that. Seconded. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Poland.
I'd like to propose Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you very much. Do you have a seconder for that? So I believe now we're going to go to a ballot. Is that correct?
Yes, just
Of course.
fill them in.
Thank you very much. Thank you. To try and aid democracy, that was a tie that time. So we're going to have one more vote and then I'll make my choice if there's no deciding vote after that occasion. Okay, thank you. And just announcing.
Yeah, no, that's Rob. just to confirm that we've had 5 votes for Mrs Taylor, 5 votes for Mr Piper and 2 abstentions. So it's down to the casting vote of the chairman.
Thank you very much. I'd like to congratulate Deborah Taylor for being my vice. Thank you very much. So thank you very much. And thank you for the patience as well. We've got the printing and things like that. So we're going to move on to item number 3 now. And now the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of March, 2026. I move that these are taken as read, confirmed and signed, and that's agreed. Thank you very much. We have questions timed. I believe we've had 1 question, but not from a member of the public. So I can move on to number 5, which is a question from members using standing order number 32. And that's a question for Mr. Inners. The question or response has been circulated to members of the committee prior to the start of the meeting and will be taken as read. This has also been published to the council's website for public information. I would like to remind members there is no discussion held on this question. Mr. Innes is present today. Would you like to ask a supplementary question? Thank you very much. Can I remind you it has to be? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for the answer. I just wanted to raise the point that does the council take consideration of people within the area when homes such as these are put in place? Because it can affect the residential area of where these homes are placed. So, for example, we've had some concern raised in Melton where additional traffic flow into a cul-de-sac and other issues could result from the placement of these. And I'm just wondering if the council, when they do their quality checks, actually take into account the views of the people in the area.
Tim or Sharon, would you like to answer that, or? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Innes. The local authority aren't approached, or nor do we have any part in the decision making around planning applications. At the moment, they are dealt with by the districts in which the property is to be based. So we aren't part of any quality checking around a planning application at all.
Thank you very much for the response, and thank you, Mr. Innes. You're welcome to stay within the meeting now. You can watch us and enjoy the afternoon. Okay, enjoy your afternoon. Thank you very much. Item number 6 is urgent items. We have no urgent items today. And number 7 is declarations of interest in respect to items of the agenda. Do any members wish to declare any interest? No. And number 8 is declarations of party whip in accordance with the overview and scrutiny procedure rule 16. Any declarations of party whip? No. Perfect, thank you. And item number 9 is petitions. I haven't received any notice of petitions. So we move on to item number 10, which is the Leicestershire School Term Time Autumn 27 to Summer 32. Tim Brown, Interim Director of Education, Inclusion and Additional Needs, and Renata Chancellor, Head of Service, Education Sufficiency, will present the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek the committee's views on the proposed Leicestershire School term dates and holiday dates for Leicestershire maintained schools covering the 5 years from autumn 27 to summer 32. As members will be aware, the council has a statutory duty under the Education Act to set school term dates for maintained schools, ensuring there are 190 days each academic year. Whilst academies are able to set their own dates, the majority continue to follow the County Council's pattern. For this time, we've put forward 2 models that have been developed and retain both models retain the Leicestershire traditional early July finish, which many families value. So model 1 keeps the historic pattern of an early summer finish, including a 1-week October half term. Model 2 retains the same early summer break, but proposes an earlier autumn August return to allow for a 2-week October half term. The alternative model is intended to address concerns about the long autumn term, learning loss and childcare pressures that some families experience, and an upsurge in safeguarding issues and referrals, which we do experience during the long 6-week summer holiday, while still preserving the early summer break preferred by Leicestershire families. So a 6-week public consultation is currently underway. It started on the 5th of May and it runs to the 15th of June, primarily by an online survey with accessible alternatives available should the public require it. And we're also asking any comments that members today have got prior to a decision being made and a final decision coming back to Cabinet on the 8th of September with a recommended model for approval. Thank you very much, Chair.
Mr. Pugsley, would you like to make any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, firstly, I'm really pleased that the consultation is now underway. The point that I would want to draw out is that both options protect the Leicestershire fortnight. I think that's the part that really matters because it defines part of who we are as a county. You know, generations of families have built their summers around the fact that our schools break up on average a couple of weeks earlier than anywhere else. And it's something evidently that people really value in Leicestershire. So whichever way the consultation goes, the early summer break is safe. And I think that's the reassurance that residents will most want to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm opening the floor now to questions from members. Yeah, Mr. Piper.
Thank you, Chair. The two options are being posted as being the same and different. But I've had a comment back on Facebook that actually says the one which is classed as the same or identical isn't, because it changes the date of a half term to coincide with the rest of the country, and therefore ignoring the cheap rates that the Leicestershire students and families would have enjoyed. So whilst the option has been kept for the national holidays for the summer, it isn't for the summer for the half term, but it is being sold as being no change. Perhaps you'd like to comment on both of those issues.
Certainly, thank you. So Model 1 keeps the historic pattern of the early finish, including an October half term. So it wasn't badged as being the whole pattern being the same, but it is badged as keeping the Leicestershire fortnight, which was the popular option for residents. But in order to make sure that residents have the option to adopt an earlier half term and have a 2-week half term, Model 2 does allow the traditional Leicestershire fortnight, but also allows for the earlier August return and a 2-week half term. So you can have that offset half term compared to the national. It's also intended to keep in line, Model 1, to keep in line with the city, who are going for the later October half term as well. Because what we do know from residents is that they do like the councils to align their term dates, because the difficulties for those children who are on the border or going to different schools within Leicester City or Leicestershire County Council as well. But of course, this is a consultation, so we're keen to seek views, and if that's a particular issue, we will take that into consideration in forming the final option.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Really pleased to see that consultation went out with the July fortnight in there, which as Mr. Pugsley said, it's a really special thing for Leicestershire families, so we don't want to lose that. My point really is about Leicester City. So in the past, we've always worked really closely with them. It says in here that we attempted to again, but they are slightly different. And I think my feedback would be we need to be aligning with Leicester City, especially with LGR on the horizon, because if some of the schools that we're setting term dates for 5 years then go into Leicester City, we're in a right mess. So I think everything needs to be done with the city to the best of our ability. I don't think it will work with us being separate. And then just in the actual consultation, where you've sort of listed all the term dates that Northamptonshire, Lincolnshire, Northamptonshire, all in. You haven't done any examples of Leicester City, what their current consultation. I just wonder why there's no comparison. So people that are filling in the consultation can look at all the cross. You seem to have done all the other boundary crosses apart from Leicester City in the consultation. I just wonder why you haven't done that as an example, so people are fully informed about when the Leicester City are planning theirs, and that would inform their decision. So none of the comparisons include Leicester City, which I found really strange in the consultation. So those are my 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. So I completely agree that we are keen to align as far as possible with the city. It is the first year in the cycle, which means we would be a little bit different to them. Later years do fall more in line, but that's certainly something which we will get feedback from during the consultation process and make sure that we are aligned as close as possible. We'll have various meetings scheduled with the city to arrange to come to some alignment as far as possible. But of course, each council makes their own decisions around the ultimate option we go forward with. The models we've looked at, the Leicester City has by and large been the same as us in the past. So residents will be aware that that's the preferred approach. When the document was produced, we weren't entirely sure what the final pattern was going to be for Leicester City, so we weren't able to include further details around that. But it's certainly something which we can take into account. And I think residents will speak around that as part of the consultation. We're aware that there's been significant feedback. I think to date there's been over 5,000 responses to the consultation.
I understand that the timing didn't work out, but maybe we should have delayed our consultation, because I think that's a huge piece that's missing from the consultation, and people are not able, parents, teachers, are be able to look at all the other boundary changes, but not Leicester City. So I think that's a real flaw with this consultation, and maybe you should just delay for a few days so you could put Leicester City on here, because I think you're going to get very skewed results by people that might have children in county and city schools not being able to respond to the consultation because they don't have the data. So I think that's a real flaw with this, and I think that's something that you need to look at again, and whether you need to go back out and reconcile with Leicester City in there now you know the dates, or whether you add it to it, because I think that's a huge gap missing.
We've been in considerable discussions with Leicester City, and we have agreed to go out with our dates, and they've gone out with their dates. I don't think it's a flaw at all. Residents have still got the option to feed back to us, and these are proposals after all, so we'll make a final decision in September.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Take on board the points that Councillor Taylor says. I do think it's also worth mentioning, though, that there is a question in the consultation which is asking people who are filling it out how important they think it is that those dates are aligned. So we are still getting that data that we can take into the decision-making process after the consultation.
Thank you very much. And I'll start by saying I think it's very welcome that both options keep the Leicestershire fortnight. Holidays are so expensive. It causes a lot of concern for families that might not otherwise be able to afford to go on holiday, that they can do at a relatively cheaper. It's still horrendously expensive, but a relatively cheaper price in those times. And I think the holidays is yes, it's a luxury on one level, but it's much family time is that building up? How many memories is that creating for those families that otherwise they wouldn't be able to have? So I just want to sort of say thank you for doing that. Can I clarify in terms of Leicester City? Are they different? Are the times they proposing different to both models 1 and 2? First of all.
Hi there. They are, but only a couple of days. So I think for the first year of the consultation for 2027-28 academic year, I believe Leicester City are proposing finishing for the summer holidays a week after the county council is proposing to break up. We wanted to make sure we were maintaining that 2-week Leicestershire fortnight that's really important to Leicestershire families. So we've gone with the dates that we're obviously proposing. As we get closer to the subsequent years, the patterns themselves do get closer together. So for 2028-29 onwards, there's only a difference of 2 days between the ending of the Leicestershire County council pattern and the Leicester City pattern. So it's relatively minimal in subsequent years. It's the first year where there's quite a difference. And I think it's useful to note that there is a difference between the way that the county council sets patterns versus the way that the city council sets patterns. So the county council doesn't set inset days. That's a matter for head teachers and for trusts across the county. In Leicester City, they do set some inset days. And so there will already be an element of flexibility across Leicestershire schools, depending on the decisions that individual head teachers and trusts take around their inset days. So there is already a small amount of flexibility around the start and end of term dates, depending on decisions that are taken by individual head teachers anyway. So we do feel, aside from the first year of the pattern, that the 2-day discrepancy in subsequent years is unlikely to have a huge detrimental impact, particularly as head teachers will have the opportunity to choose which days they use as inset days on either end of the school term.
Thank you. So, I mean, appreciate that. Thank you very much. So it's 2 days difference subsequent year. I mean, forgive me if I'm being stupid. Does that mean they don't finish on a Friday? One or the other doesn't finish on a Friday?
In subsequent years, as a result of us proposing to start school on the day after the August bank holiday, so it would be on a Tuesday, it does mean in subsequent years that most of our patterns finish on a Thursday, I believe, a Wednesday or a Thursday. So effectively, we would be finishing towards the end of that week rather than it being a full week and ending on a Friday. However, again, noting that head teachers may choose to use different days as inset days, it may mean that that last week is slightly different anyway across the county schools.
And in terms of, I guess, my main question, model one, I think I'm right in saying, is basically what we have now. Is that correct? And if that is correct, have we had any? It's very simply put, what's the problem that model two is trying to fix? Because I've got 2 primary school age children myself, and I think the current pattern works well. It is a very long holiday. It costs a lot in childcare. But then when it comes to sort of holiday clubs and so forth, you are paying relatively less later on in the years. I mentioned at the start, you've got your ability to go on holiday at a relatively cheaper rate, which is good. So I personally don't see a problem with the system as it is now. I appreciate we may be legally obliged to come out and sort of check every few years, but I guess I'm thinking if it ain't broke, don't fix it, unless there's loads of complaints that I'm not aware of. And just to sort of reinforce the point, I think as well about sort of trying to tie in with the city. If model one does that better, again, I think it would just reinforce that would be my preference. Again, speaking as a parent rather than as a counsellor necessarily, my eldest is in year 5 now, so when he goes up to secondary school, he will very likely be going to a city school, and there'll be lots of others in my part where I live that will be in a similar situation, and vice versa for those coming across the border. So I think it would save a significant number of parents a lot of hassle if we don't have big differences between them. But as I say, keeping that Leicestershire fortnight is the most important thing.
Yes, thank you. So I think you're absolutely right. What we heard loud and clear was the Leicestershire fortnight was really important for us to keep in setting new patterns, which is why we've ensured that we've maintained that. We will be wanting to work with Leicester City colleagues following both of our consultations to look where we can to try and align the dates. I think, interestingly, noting that Tim's already covered off some of the reasons and the rationale for why we potentially might want to have the 2-week October half term as an option. The summer holiday period is a really expensive time for parents, and it's something that has come up on a regular basis for us to consider. So we did want to ask parents around whether this is something they want to consider. I think, really interestingly, just feeding back on where we're at currently, there's still a number of weeks of the consultation period left, but the responses we've had are about 50-50 between the options at the moment. So I think what that does tell us is that there is actually quite an appetite out there for a different pattern. So it will be really interesting when we get the full feedback through from the consultation to consider all of the feedback in the round that we've had and help use that to help us make a recommendation through to members in September.
I think probably worth also adding that what we're also seeing is there's lots of lost learning by having such a long autumn term, because children get ill, staff get ill, and also having a longer summer holiday, children regress during that time as well. So it will address those issues particularly, and again, allowing residents to have an extra opportunity for a cheap holiday as well.
Apologies. Yeah, I think that's really good. If you've not done it already, I'd strongly encourage you to sort of ask all the individual schools to put it in their own newsletters and so forth and get it out that way so even more parents are aware of it. And I think as well as the numbers overall that are responding, I think it'd be really interesting to see where they're responding from, because with the very best will in the world, if you're living in Ashby, tying in with Leicester City is probably less of an issue to you than if you're living in Thurmaston or Anstey or Glenfield or something. And but that should still be taken into account, I think.
Miss Penderbury.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my points have been covered, but there was one thing I just wanted to ask. You spoke about safeguarding being one of the reasons you were looking at this alternate model. Does safeguarding become far more of a problem the longer the holiday? Can you expand on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so what we see from, particularly over the summer holiday, because it is a lengthy holiday, the numbers of referrals do increase. We also see before each holiday an upsurge in referrals as well, regardless of how long the holiday is. But that's, I suspect, to do with worries and concerns that schools particularly have over families not being, not accessing or not seeing children on a regular basis. But certainly the summer holiday does see a spike that we're aware of.
Thank you. Mr. Piper.
Thank you, Chair. If I may address that comment about you made about inset days, surely if we could encourage headmasters to clump the inset days together into week blocks randomly through the year, that would give perhaps individual schools the opportunity, or the parents of the schools, to be able to get a holiday when nobody else or very few other people are at a holiday. And I would presume that it's easier for parents to schedule a week of inset rather than individual inset days. Perhaps Mr. Poland would clarify that. And it just seems to me that if we're going to have a number of inset days across the year, clumping them together into a specific working week per school would be much more advantageous. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's a really useful comment. I think what we're mostly concerned about is the quality of education for children and young people, and clumping a number of inset days together is not the best way of ensuring the quality for and the training for staff, because it becomes too intensive over a short period. And we're also worried about children and young people missing another block and having longer holidays as well. So that would compound that issue for us as well. But I think what we're mindful of is that multi-academy trusts have discretion to set their own term dates and their own inset dates as well. Whilst the city do guide their own maintained schools, I think that it's very clear that the direction of travel is for schools to have that autonomy, and I would be concerned about if we were going against that direction of travel.
Yes, I wasn't talking about taking away their autonomy. I actually think I said the words of persuading them or encouraging them rather than taking away that autonomy.
No further questions? Good. Well, thank you so much. And I think I echo everyone's comments around the July fortnight. It's quite a sense of pride, actually, when you have that week, because you're sort of the only ones, along with some like Scottish children generally and families, that's all you've ever seen. Is there something, you know, they're from Leicester before you get the Leicester shirts on the beach and things. So there's a sense of pride with that. Also, I think there's also a really comforting thing as a parent knowing that. I know we just booked our summer holiday 18 months ago, and if you know when these are coming, and that July fortnight is such a thing that you aim for as a parent, as a family. So thank you again for that. And just Mr. Piper, I as a parent, you sort of know when the inset days are going to be because they're generally always at the start or end of terms. You do get those occasional ones. I know that my son's secondary school has that random one just before December. But normally, so you do get in that regular pattern. So yeah, no, I think this is a common sense approach. My sister lives in Lincolnshire and they have a double fortnight. They have a fortnight in the October and it works for her. She knows, and I think they take advantage of having a 2-week holiday then rather than a summer because again it's cheaper for them. So I think there's options there that are both acceptable. It'd be interesting to see what the results are. So thank you very much for presenting it today. Thank you. We're going to move on now to the next item, which is number 11, which is the elective home education in Leicestershire, which can be found on pages 37 to 44. Tim's going to be introducing this item again, along with Beth Clements, Head of Service. I've also received some comments from Mr. Crook, so thank you very much for them. And I've forwarded them on to the officers, so they'll be answering some of those comments today during their presentation as well, okay? So in your own time, if you'd like to start, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just to apologise that unfortunately Beth's been called away urgently, so I was unable to join us for the meeting today. So this report provides an overview of elective home education in the county, setting out the council's statutory duties and how these are delivered through the inclusion service. EHE has grown significantly both nationally and also locally over recent years. In Leicestershire, our numbers have grown from just over 1,000 in 22-23 to around 1,400 in 24-25, with similar levels continuing this year, and that's reflected nationally as well. What it does, it brings both opportunities and challenges, particularly around ensuring that all children receive a suitable education and remain visible to services as well, because of course we know education protects, and whilst children are in school, they are seen on a day-to-day basis. And when children aren't in school, you don't always know what's happening. I should say, though, that some families, many families provide an excellent home education, so that's not a value judgment at all, it's just the reality of the situation we find ourselves faced with. The report outlines the balance of responsibilities. Parents have the right to home educate and are responsible for providing a suitable education, while the local authority must assess whether that education is appropriate and take action where concerns arise. Alongside this, safeguarding duties remain absolutely paramount. When a parent does decide to electively home educate, they are taking full responsibility for that child's education. And there are no responsibilities to the council to provide additional support over and above checking the suitability of that education. However, we do, through a number of different methods, provide resources or links to resources. And more recently, our Oakfield Short Stay School has become a registered exam centre because one of the issues we were aware of that some EHE families were struggling to find exam centres so their children could take examinations. So we've resolved that issue from September, which is really good news. I should say that members choose to home educate for a wide variety of reasons. While some do because it's a very positive lifestyle choice or cultural choice, some also cite unmet needs and relationships breaking down with their school as well. But the Inclusion Service has arrangements in place to assess provision, prioritise the most vulnerable children, and to work with partners. And the report highlights the importance of early engagement with schools and families, improved data on the reasons for home education, and stronger agency working. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pugsley, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaking truthfully, I do have real concerns about elective home education. And over the past year, I've heard many members of this committee express similar things whenever it's come up in other items. And that's exactly why I felt it was important to bring this as a standalone item to the committee so that we can have a discussion on it. So as has been mentioned, our numbers have climbed steadily from just over 1,000 children 3 years ago to around 1,400 now, which is roughly in line with the national trend. What concerns me most is why families are making this choice. For a large number, it's mental health or feeling that the school provision hasn't been able to meet their child's needs, particularly around SEND. So in other words, for quite a few families, it's not a free and positive choice at all. For some, it's become a last resort when something else hasn't worked. And on top of that, for more than a third of the cohort, we don't have a clearly recorded reason, which makes it much harder to target help where it's needed. So I want to be fair to the service because they're doing a good job with limited capacity. And I can see real strength in the effort to support families before they make this decision, the early conversations with schools, the checks that robust discussions have been had, all of this happening along with prioritising the most vulnerable children. My honest worry is more about what happens after a child is in home education. Once a family's settled into elective home education, the ongoing offer is fairly light. I'd like us to think about whether there's more we can do to keep supporting those children and families on an ongoing basis so that no child drifts out of sight. This is something genuinely that I'd like to work on, and I don't pretend to have all of the answers on this. So more than anything, I'd like to hear the thoughts of the committee because I know this concern is shared, and I think there's real value in this shaping this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pugsley. And I'd just like to start by thanking you for bringing this item. I think it's really interesting. And some of those reasons for people not entering mainstream education are really important for us to recognise. I know in my email box, when people often talk about struggling to get either SEND placements or they're transferring areas and they want to move to school and they can't get into the school they want, they often label this as their last resort, like you said. And I think that's really important for us to take away and look at those reasons and how we can support them. I think for me, the biggest question here and continues to be how, one, we can learn from the people doing it really well and how we can promote that, because you're really right to say, Tim, that there are really great examples out there and actually probably the vast majority are doing a really good job. And how we make sure that is captured and fed on to those that are maybe struggling with the process, because obviously there is a huge adjustment, I imagine, to doing that. So, and I'm glad to hear we're looking at ways to support them, because I think that's fundamental. And whilst you said you maybe don't have the answers, I wonder if the council are doing anything. It's brilliant to hear about the additional assessment centre set up to do examinations and things, but moving forward, have we got any plans or any strategies to try and fill that support space? I know it's not a statutory responsibility, but there's obviously a growing need for that. So I wonder if there's any plans afoot for that.
Thank you, Chair. So the Inclusion Service has additional capacity in order to provide support for families where they are either considering going back into school because they've decided they don't want to do that anymore, or signposting them to groups or other elective home education families who have been doing it for a while and have that expertise as well. So we have a major signposting function, but we're also able to work with families to ensure they have a place at a school should they so wish to return to a mainstream education.
Thank you. And this has been a long concern of mine when I was the lead member for this service. It's always been really concerning about elected home education. And like you said, some are very positive, but in my experience, the majority probably aren't so positive. I think we have very limited powers, and I think it's, we can do all we can to support these families, but they don't have to accept that support. And I think the way forward, Mr. Pugsley, you asked for a comment here, is ensuring the government does bring in this register of home educated, because we still don't have a register. So we have unknown children that we don't know are unknown. So making sure that register comes in. But I think it's lobbying government to change the statutory duties that councils have, because we don't have any statutory duties for elected home education. So I think if that's a message to take away, it's lobbying government to make sure that they give councils the statutory ability to highlight concerns that we have. I know we've done limited what we can do, but it's the government that needs to change their policy. Just on to my few questions. I've got 4 points, if I may, Chair. Just the first one on paragraph 29. You're just mentioning limited capacity within the inclusion service. So I just wonder how much that's impacting. So I'd like some more details around why we've got limited capacity, why we're not able to cover what we need to cover. So a bit more information about that. On to paragraph 36, just really about these webinars. So have you got any figures about how many parents have viewed them? Have they found them useful? Are they effective? What impact are they having? So just some more details around those webinars, if possible, please. Then on to paragraph 37. I think, as probably many members here, my mailbox is full of these emails that I get from my families about the breakdown in communication between families and schools. And I think that is a real issue that we need to be addressing, because that's a lot of reasons why families choose to elective home educate, because the relationship with the school is totally broken down and they have lost faith in that school to support their child, which is understandable. I'd be exactly the same. So I'd be interested to know what we're doing to fix that relationship between schools and families, because I think that's where the breakdown. We come in at a crisis point. We should be getting early and making sure that communication line is open so that relationship doesn't break down. And my final point is on paragraph 40, just about how many positive cases we've got that have chosen elected home education as a positive option. So you mentioned there's, we've got data about why children. So how many cases have we got out of those stats that you think are positive and children have gone on to fulfill their best potential through elected home education? Because from my mailbox, obviously I won't get the positives, I get the negatives, but I don't ever get any positives about elected home education. So you must have some. So have you got the data on that, please? And that's it. Thank you, Chair.
So let me just go back through. What we've seen gradually is that the numbers of elective home educated children has been growing. We have added additional capacity to the inclusion service, and we've got that flexibility to move it around. But what we've also seen is all of the numbers of vulnerable children are increasing as well. So that capacity is stretched, but we are able to move capacity around in order to support those that most need it and those who are most vulnerable as well. Of course, we would always want more capacity and more resource, but obviously that we have limited capacity. We have to allocate that accordingly. What we are very clear about is that those children we are concerned about do have visits, and they are also worked with, and the families worked with to either re-engage in really quality home education or return to school, and we'll issue school attendance orders where we need to as well. So I'm not overly concerned around the capacity issue, but it is a pressure that we need to watch very closely at this point in time. We also see additional responsibilities around the social care reforms and our ability to have to agree for elective home education for those children that have a child protection plan as well. So I welcome that, but I do recognise your comments around the statutory duties are limited for local authorities, and like you, I've been campaigning for over 20 years now to increase it, because it's the one area that does really keep me awake at night, because you just don't know what you don't know. So in terms of impact, I don't know the numbers of attending off the top of my head and the impact of those seminars, but I'll certainly see what information we've got and come back to you outside of the meeting if that's okay. It's worth saying that a lot of the work the inclusion service does, and through both the elective home education staff but also the attendance team, is to try and work with schools and with families around that relationship breakdown, because we often find that's the root cause of an issue with attendance or going elective home educating. Of course, there has to be some work done on both sides with that. But if we can repair that relationship, we will. Sometimes it's around a managed move to an alternative provider. Sometimes we'll provide temporary provision through Oakfield whilst that child moves to another setting, or it could be to do with mental health issues. So a whole raft of concerns there, which we look to address where we can. But I should say, it's often the case you don't hear about the good news stories. And we don't routinely record it because actually we don't know, because parents aren't required to tell us whether their child's passed GCSE examinations, for example, and they go to a range of different examination centres. So we just don't record that information.
Just the last point on number. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah,
thanks, Miss Penbury.
Thank you. Really following on from Councillor Taylor's comments. You talk at paragraph 29 about limited capacity and prioritising those that you are aware of may require additional support. Does that mean that some children are never reviewed? And a follow-up question, once a child has finished education, so at age 18, how many of those are going on to be not in education, training, etc.? And also just to say thank you for this report. I think it's really worthwhile, really worthwhile.
We will review all cases and we will triage cases and prioritise them accordingly. So that's an ongoing process. Obviously, we have more capacity. We would want to review those more regularly. But we continue to meet our statutory duties around elective home education. So I'm confident in that. In terms of the NEET numbers, again, the problem goes back to Mrs. Taylor's point earlier that families aren't required to register. So you just don't know the numbers that we're talking about. We more recently recruited a post-16 service manager because I want to do some more detailed work around post-16 generally across the county. And we are going to look at the NEET numbers and look at different ways in which we can help those children back, or those young people back into education, employment or training. And there's been some really quite impressive successes in 1 or 2 counties, and we're looking to mirror that as well. But again, I wouldn't be able to tell you whether they're EHE children specifically.
I think the NEET metric could be a really valuable assessment as to how successful homeschooling is. If they are able to, if the children are then able to progress after school. I personally admire anybody who teaches their own child at home. I certainly could not have done it.
Mr. Poland.
Thank you. It certainly sounds from members have said what you said is that a register would be in order. Obviously, children or under normal circumstances have to register at school, and effectively it's a homeschool, isn't it? It's literally the name. So I think that would make sense, and be a good way to at least know what we don't know, if you see what I mean, to Ms. Taylor's point. Do we or anybody else monitor the level of education that homeschool people, children are getting? So I get if you're a teacher and you've got kids and you want to give up your time to do that, that's one thing. If I try to teach my children, I think my 9-year-old's already about my level of maths, right? So it's just like there's just no chance. But I could take them out tomorrow and just say, I'm teaching them both, right? But I shudder to think what the education would be when they come out of that. So are we actually checking that these parents are actually qualified? Not qualified, but are the children getting an education appropriate to that level? Because that does concern me as well, actually, that maybe it comes to GCSE and unless your parents are teachers, that could be a problem.
A really good question. There is no requirement for elective home education families to take formal examinations. It just has to be an education which is suitable to their lifestyle, and that's quite a broad statement, and it can cover a whole raft of different educational experiences, right through from formal examinations to traveller families teaching their child or their children how to carry on the family trade. So it's very difficult to monitor, and we certainly don't record that, and we wouldn't know what the results were. And actually, I suppose there's a perception issue around whether one qualification is better than another, really, as well.
So again, just a comment, really. I think that there is a fairness aspect for me as well about children that are homeschooled versus not. We talked about the holidays in the last item. If I was to take my 2 kids out of school for 3 days or something at the end of term, I'd probably expect a fine to turn up. But if they're homeschooled, then obviously they can go whenever they like, and there's not. The reason I'm told that you get the sort of the strictness is because it's vital they don't miss a day's schooling. Well, if it is vital, then what are we doing to ensure that that's all children? Again, it's more of a comment than anything than asking you to comment on.
Mr. Piper.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to talk about 3 items, and again, they're predominantly comments and not questions. And they answer some of the things that you said that you don't know. So that's why I think it's appropriate. The first family I wanted to talk about, the mother homeschooled her children during the primary school years. she suggested at the time it was because one of the children, or at least one of them, was quite badly dyslexic. And both of those boys now have gone off, they've gone and got the university degrees, and they've got good careers in their chosen career path. So it can work. Obviously, it can work. The second one, where the family actually they are homeschooling their two teenage children, and in fact they don't homeschool. They actually send the children to a private tutor, and with this coming up, I actually messaged the mother and asked if she would mind giving me the reasons why they decided to homeschool these two children. And I will quote, and I'll send you a copy if you want it for the minutes. We took ours out of secondary education as they really learnt nothing. Class sizes too big, lessons too short. When you have lessons too short when you have disrupted children. See, I wasn't taught to read properly. So most of the lesson was taken up just telling them what the homework was. That was this lady's comment. Now, I was around at their house once when somebody, I believe from the county council, was grilling her. It was an intensive interrogation as to what her, at the time it was only her son that was homeschooled, was doing or not doing, and was he getting enough exercise, and and it really was quite an interrogation. And I beg your pardon. The phone is on silent, Chair. It's just that the emergency ones come straight through. So that was the second issue. The third point I would like to make is why some people homeschool. And I'm not saying this is specifically pertinent to Leicestershire, but generally I have talked to people who have taken their children out of school or not sent them to school because they do not believe that some of the things that they are being taught in school is appropriate for their children. And one of the main examples is, when you've got infant school children who can pretend that they're any gender they want without informing the parents and things like that. And some parents are actually quite worried about what their children are being taught at schools. So they are some of the reasons, and I hope that feedback is useful to you. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to come back or okay? Any further questions? Yes, Dr. North.
Hi. A couple of questions. Say you've got 1,400 homeschooled children at present, around that number. How many has the council actually supported with education? Do you have a number?
We wouldn't support any with education. That's not the role of the council with elective home educated children.
Okay, so you don't signpost, you don't say this is what you can do to effectively homeschool your children? Or... We
would signpost when a family decides to elect to home educate, we would have that discussion and that meeting with the family to signpost them to resources that they can access or help groups that can do that. And that would be every family that deregisters from school.
Okay, thank you. I have some constituents as well that also have issues locally, but I'll contact you personally about those outside of this meeting because they are personal. I do wonder though, if the numbers continue to rise, what sort of rates are you predicting for elective home care for education? Sorry.
We don't predict them. What we find is that numbers will generally rise towards the end of the summer term, and then they'll drop back again. So we'll find they'll probably drop back quite significantly by September. Nationally, there's been an annual growth. I can't recall the actual percentage over recent years, but it's something we are monitoring, and where we need to increase resource to cater for those young people, we do. The Association of Directors of Children's Services also does an annual survey for elective home education, because again, it's something which we are very minded about, and we are concerned about the growth in numbers. which is why the government's starting to tighten the regulations, but certainly not as much as I would like them to, and we'll continue that persuasion and ask them to do that.
It's a concern as well for me locally within my ward as well. I think it's going to increase massively, and I think we've got massive gaps in education and funding that aren't supporting the current model at all. So it'd be nice to have that forecasted information. But just last question. Out of the 69 school attendance orders issued last year, how many resulted in a child returning to school, and how many remained outside of education, please?
I need to come back to you on that. I don't have that information to hand, so I can certainly come back outside.
I'd really like that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's your first meeting as well, so welcome to the committee. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think what's really clear is that there is a lot of appetite to discuss this, and I'd welcome this back at some point in the future as well. Also hearing a lot of the conversations around not knowing. There's lots of gaps in probably your knowledge as well as our own. And I think the more we know, the more we can help you, Mr. Pugsley, in what you asked for, which is suggestions. And I know, thinking about when you're trying to understand lifestyle or health choices, removing like stigma or removing barriers to sharing that. And I know a lot of this sometimes is they have their reasons and they're not going to share with us, but we can remove those and providing a space and a place for families who choose this, because it is a genuine choice. They are making choices often for the best reasons, and finding a way to integrate with them and interact with them so we can learn from them. I still believe that's the way forward. So even as something as simple as a little email like at the bottom of our resources page, or I'm assuming we have a landing page for homeschooling or something on the internet. If you want further help, stick your email address in. We'd suddenly probably gather 100 email addresses over a month, and that fills in maybe some of these gaps. Something as simple as that might be an easy way forward. But that's just off the top of my head. But thank you for bringing it. Mrs. Seaton, I saw you sneak in there.
I did. Thank you very much. I don't know whether this is appropriate, what I'm going to suggest, but obviously there's a lot of concern over home educated children, whether they're falling onto the radar or not. And I know the groups I'm going to talk about now are commercial, but there is an awful lot of groups like Education Otherwise that help parents educate their children at home. And I wondered whether it would be appropriate at another stage for any of those to come in and talk to us about what they do, why they think they're needed. It might just focus our minds a little bit more on what is provided out there. So
thank you very much. And with the approval of the rest of the committee, I'd happily, work with officers to try and set up something, whether it's during this meeting, whether it's like a drop-in session or something to learn more. I think that's a really good idea and something we can take away and think about how we manage. Thank you.
Chair,
yeah, sorry.
I would just be mindful around the commercial side of that, and whether if we're inviting one group in, we may get some challenge about why we're not inviting other groups in.
No, of course, and I'll work with officers and look at how we do that sensitively. Thank you. Very quickly, Dr. North, apologies.
Thank you. I was just going to say I really support what Mrs. Seaton just said. It doesn't have to always be commercialised, but there's a lot of local charities that are underutilised currently that do have spaces in these areas. And I think it's important for demographic areas and maybe some sort of interaction reports to find out how many of those can actually support what number of children in what areas. It may provide some future planning and, you get an idea of numbers. Thank you.
There's no further comments? Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you for that. It's a really interesting item. Thank you. So we're going to move on to item 12 now, which is the corporate parenting strategy. Sharon Cook, Interim Director of Children and Family Services, will present the report with Kay Fletcher, Interim Assistant Director for Targeted Early Help. I'm not sure. Is Holly here?
No, sorry, she's not. She's had to deal with.
I thought I'd check for. I keep reading out the names. It's a long list. So if you'd like to share the report, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. So the purpose of the report is to provide you as a committee with the details of our updated corporate parenting strategy that runs from 2026 to 2029. The corporate parenting strategy sets out how the county council will meet its statutory duties and responsibilities to our children in care and care leavers. It's not a new document, it's something that we have to have in place and have had a strategy in place for some time. On the report, or in the report, paragraph 3 onwards takes the committee through the statutory and legal framework in which we have a duty as corporate parents, and that duty includes how we set out within a corporate parenting strategy how we will meet those duties and responsibilities, not only as a council but with our partner agencies. So paragraph 5 outlines that the strategy clearly sets out our continued commitment to meeting our corporate responsibilities, and that's underpinned by the framework that is set out in the Children Act, which guides you through the principles and responsibilities as set out in the Children and Social Work Act 2017. We should be minded that the new Children's Wellbeing and Schools Act actually emphasises and strengthens everybody's responsibility around corporate parenting and gives those responsibilities to government officers and others to think about our children in care and care leavers when making decisions. So we welcome that addition. We are waiting for the guidance and regulations that will come to us from that act being in place to say a little bit more about how all that will work. So paragraph 10 onwards takes you through that our strategy continues to promote our commitment to act as ambitious, caring and effective corporate parents that we would want for our children in care and care leavers, what we would want for any of our children. It's links to our promise. So our promise was agreed and signed off by the committee in 2019, which highlights the key areas that we believe we worked on with our young people at the time, are key areas that would really help support them as children in care and as they move into the adult world. We've attached for your information a copy of the strategy, a copy of the version that's been written for children and young people, and some of our children and young people in care have inputted to what needs to be in that strategy. So it's there as a user-friendly version for those children. And we've also attached for your information the promise that was agreed in 2019. So the committee's got that information. I think that's all I need to say, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Pugsley first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just say quickly, the thing that stands out to me most in this strategy is the fact that it's been shaped by both the voices of children in care and care leavers themselves. And the way that's been done is through things such as the Youth Voice Council and the Aftercare Council. And I'd also like to take this moment, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to say as one of the co-chairs of the Corporate Parenting Board, I'd like to remind all colleagues that corporate parenting is the responsibility of every single one of us, not just the councillors on this committee. And I think the test that this strategy sets is the right one, and that's, would this be good enough for your own child? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pugsley. Mr. Piper.
Thank you, Chair. On page 48, in paragraph 23, timetable for discussions, it actually says, as the changes made in the strategy are only minor. Is it possible for you just to summarise the changes? Thank you.
Yes, sorry, I didn't switch my mic on. The changes are making sure that it's up to date with the new legislation. So the minor changes are references to new legislation to make sure that that is it's still relevant.
Henry.
Thank you, Chair. It's really just going down to the figures. I note that 54% page, whatever that is, page 61, in your statistics, you say 54% of care leavers are not in education, employment or training. I know nationally the statistics of those who haven't left care is something like 14%. What is being done to, and why? Why is it such a significant difference? And one other question, I know we have a number of care homes in our areas that are not from Leicestershire County Council. And I know they are being monitored by their own areas, but I assume if they've been educated and brought up in our areas, at some point they will, at least a percentage of them will want to stay in this area. So at what point do they move on to us, and at what point are we monitoring them? And there was one other thing. You talk about care leavers at university. There's no mention of apprenticeships. And I noticed there's no real statistics there for children with SEND. And I assume there's quite a significant number of children in care who have SEND needs. Sorry, quite a long list. I hope that's okay. And thank you for the report.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just to clarify, were you referring to the percentage that says 54% of 18 plus care leavers are in education? Yeah, so you're asking about, yeah, no, that's, I just wanted to clarify. We know that nationally, care leavers are represented too high in the numbers of those that aren't in education, training and employment. We have a focused area of work via our virtual school, work with 16 plus, work around apprenticeships, and work to actually focus getting our children into education and training. We know and understand that the trauma that many of these children have experienced means that at 16, 17 and 18, they may not be in the right place to fulfill some of those extra training, additional training, which is why it's important that we are still involved up to 25 when actually they may be in a better place to be able to take up some of those offers. We do, our percentage is a high percentage for children in care and care leavers, but that doesn't mean that it's an acceptable percentage because it's in the context of what the national area is. But we have key people in the virtual school. We have people within our care leavers team who are focused on making sure that as part of every child's care plan and pathway plan, that education and their link into education and training is important. And we do that based on university is great for some children. We have children that academically fly and enjoy that. For some children and young people, they do better in more sort of trade, learning a trade. So we want to make sure that we're not pushing children down one avenue. So we do a lot. Our figures against the national averages are positive, but it's not an overall. There's more for us to do for children in care and care leavers.
Could I just add to that? Is some of that around digital poverty as well? Does that play a role within moving on? Because these days you can't apply for a job unless you've got a computer or a phone, and care leavers won't automatically have computers or phones.
We do provide for some of our care leavers that access to that and access to phones. So we would make sure that our care leavers are not disadvantaged by that. We run and have from our pathway, our personal advisors, we're looking and are setting up hubs out in the localities, so care leavers have geographically better access to coming in and seeing people, and those personal advisors would work with a young person around applications and supporting them in a way a good parent would support them. There is always more to do, but be reassured that we make sure that those things are in place. In relation to, so I think I've covered about apprenticeships. In relation to SEND, we can look at those figures. We've provided a number of key data within the strategy. We haven't provided absolutely everything, and I think it was as a way of giving an example of some of the key areas for our care leavers and the children in care. But you're right, a number of our children in care would receive additional support from special educational needs.
Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you. And as always, a really good strategy, just slightly tweaked and updated from the last one. So good to see the promise, etc., and all that's still in there, and the voice of young people does definitely come through the strategy. So really good to see. My question's about the Appendix A on page 76 of the Corporate Parenting Board Terms of Reference, and it says there the membership is made up of cross-party elected members nominated by party groups. Can you tell me what elected members are on there? Because as a group leader, I've not been asked to nominate anyone to the Corporate Parenting Board. So can I ask who's on there, please?
Yeah, the members that were on there were the member champions that were set up and were in place to support our children in care and care leavers to work on particular issues. So that came into place after review by members. Currently, those members aren't identified, so there's further work for us to do when there's been a change around whether that is still a model that works for our children, and then to identify those members. But as the model stood, we had a member from each of the main political parties who took a key lead, whether it was accommodation, education, training, and health was the other need. So we are reviewing that. We don't have, other than the co-chair, Councillor Pudsley, we don't have members on there at the moment.
I mean, if it was beneficial before, so I don't understand why sort of a year later we've not sort of moved it forward. And obviously this is a new strategy, but it's still included there, even though we don't have anyone. So it's definitely something that needs looking at quite urgently. If you're going to adopt this and it says there your membership is cross-party elected members, then it isn't. It needs snaking out, or you need to. So it's something that quite urgently needs looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, we have met with Democratic Services to look at that and look at how we take it forward. Yeah.
Any further questions? No, I fully support that. I think not only is it written in there, I think it's also really important. We all have responsibility as corporate parents. And I was going to just remind everyone, page 68 is probably the most crucial page for us because that's our responsibility. So if you have only a couple of minutes, just read that one because it reminds us why we're here doing this today. And I want to thank you all because all your questions, all your contributions feed into that. So thank you. I agree. I think we should be represented and because, you know, we're all going for the same cause, but we might have different angles of approach. And I think it's important. So yeah, I would say that. And just this is a general comment. I now am well versed in looking at PowerPoints and things like that. But if we're saying this is contributed by the young people and children, and we're presenting it to them, and I know it's a bit more colourful the bit at the end. Maybe we need to think about as a broader trying to share this in a media that is more appropriate for children and young people, because I'm 41. And I'm a bit bored of PowerPoints. I create them all day for my job, and it's repetitive. And if we can find a better way, whether it's an app, whether it's a video, or just an alternative media that we can share it with them, I think, and that's general. That's not just for this. It looks really pretty, and your graphic designer is very talented. But it's a general comment. I think if we're going to share this with children and young people, can we do a better job at serving them? So. Yes,
most definitely, and a really good point. And just to reassure that our children in care made a video with our participation workers that is something that is shown to children and young people, and that talks very clearly about corporate parenting and responsibility. So we do actively look at other mediums, but it's a really good point. Thank you.
I think Mr. Poland was first. Sorry, Mr. Poland.
Thank you. It's just so I'm new. I'm just subbing today, so I'm not really on this panel, so not something I look at closely. It's interesting that would it be good enough for my own child and treating looked after children as if they're your own, and I think that's a very, very important principle, actually. And I just think, well, with my own children, I've got a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old I mentioned earlier, and with them, I very much encourage their interests. Where they got it, I'll take them out to places, go and visit places. We went to Titanic Museum last week because that's interesting them and encourages them to do that. And they're getting to the point, the eldest one anyway, is getting to the point where he's starting to think about what he might like to do when he's older, and he asks me what I do and all of those, and he takes a real interest, and that's an important part of his development. To what extent are we able to help look after children in a similar way? So do we have a budget, for example, to be able to help take them to places like that to further their interests? Do we have situations for, or maybe older children, where we look at sort of what work experience we can offer them? Now, I appreciate this is an incredibly difficult one because we're a corporate parent, and as parents, that's something we want to do. But equally, we're a council, and there are lots of other children who aren't looked after who would also benefit from those sorts of things. So I get there's an issue there, but looking at it purely for a second with a focus of would this be good enough for my child? Do we offer anything like that towards their development? And then if you could comment, if it's possible, to sort of how we then balance that against fairness against all the other children who might like similar opportunities, but for whatever reason may not get them.
Thank you. Yeah, good question. Our children in care, whether they live with foster carers, kinship carers, or in residential care, an element of the amount that we pay for those homes includes an amount that's there for activities and pocket money. So all those various things that you've mentioned, and holidays, our children in care, the families are encouraged for them to go on holiday, and we have lots of examples of children doing all sorts of activities. On top of that, we have a corporate parenting team that have participation workers in that team who run alongside other people in the service particular groups that some young people and children are engaged in. We run, as part of fostering, a number of activities in school holidays. So we have a Fosterval every year. We run craft sessions that foster carers can come to and carers can come to, children and young people can be part of. So there are lots of activities that our children and young people can attend, and we encourage all those activities for them to have as rich engagement in those things as any child. On top of that, our virtual school set up, so especially in the summer holidays and holiday times, different activities. We run a play scheme in the summer for our children in care. So there are a variety of activities that we do and we encourage. And a number of our children in care have independent visitors, who is a person who's checked by us to be a befriender of that child or young person, and their role is to take them out, involve them in activities, and do all of those things. So I think we would always strive to do more and learn and want to do more, but we do make sure that our children have access to those activities. And when our social workers are visiting, and when our independent reviewing officers are reviewing the plans for that child, they will be checking and balancing all those things to make sure that that's an offer across for all children, and not just for some. In relation to works experience, it's something that we're really interested in developing. We have worked hard across the authority to look at apprenticeships for our youngsters. We would and do keep an open mind around, take your child to work days and what we could do and what more we could do around that. Obviously, we balance that between the number of children that we've got and just how the logistics of doing it. But that's something that I can take away and something that is on the agenda. But we do have youngsters that are involved. As an example, an IRO contacted me yesterday, and I've sent out a certificate to one of our youngsters who's involved in a local football team, doing really well there. So lots of encouragement for our children.
Mrs. Taylor.
Yeah, just very quickly, whether we can look at doing an all-member briefing on corporate parenting again. It'd be good probably to have a refresh for all members if we can fit that in with DEM services. Thank you.
And Mr. Piper.
Just a quickie. Sorry, you just mentioned there an IRO. What is an IRO?
Yeah, that's an independent reviewing officer. So they are allocated to every child we have in care and have a responsibility to have an independent oversight of the care plan for that child. Yeah.
It's these, if I may, Chair, it's these new letters and groups. And I need just to learn. I sometimes need to have Google next to me when I'm reading some of these.
Yeah, apology.
Thank you, Mr. Piper, and thank you, everybody. Again, another great item, so thank you very much. Item 13 now, which is the school's white paper and SEN reform. Tim, you're going to be introducing this one. Again, I don't think Olivia's here. Oh, Olivia is here. Olivia, welcome. Woo! There you go. I wooed you. Olivia Dale, Head of Service for Education, Strategy and Transformation. Thank you very much. And in your own time.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So this report provides an update on the government's schools white paper and the SEN reform programme, setting out the national direction of travel and what it means for us here in Leicestershire. The reforms probably represent the most significant change to the SEN system in over a decade. They come at a time of considerable pressure, which we've discussed often at this committee, with rising demand, increasing numbers of education, health and care plans, and growing financial strain across the system. At their core, the reforms aim to shift the system towards earlier intervention, stronger inclusion in mainstream settings, and more consistent graduated approach to meeting needs. This includes replacing EHCPs for most children with individual support plans, not to be confused with ISPs, individual independent special schools, and introducing clearer tiers of support. For local authorities, the key role becomes one of system leadership, bringing together education, health and care partners to ensure sufficiency of provision, improve outcomes and deliver financial stability. A key milestone for us here in Leicestershire is the submission of our local SEN reform plan later on this month. And that's not only critical for setting the strategic direction of travel, but also for securing financial support to address the historic high needs pressures, which currently accumulated deficit totals around £99 million. Overall, these reforms represent a major opportunity to reshape our system around inclusion and early help, and also bring delivery, but they also do bring delivery risks given the longevity of the implementation, which is over 10 years as well. But I think they are to be welcomed, and I'm really pleased that the partnership has worked very hard to pull together the draft plan, which has received feedback last week from the Department for Education, which has been very positive, and we'll finalise the plan during the course of the next few weeks. And of course, I'm grateful to Liv for leading that work for us here in Leicestershire. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Oh, Olivia, would you like to make any comments? Oh, Mr. Pugsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start by taking the opportunity to thank officers for their considerable work that's gone into this, which I know is very much ongoing, as Tim has said, whilst we finish developing the local plan ahead of the submission deadline. I think it's mid of June. I think it's also worth repeating one of the things that Tim has said. This is the most significant set of reforms we've had since 2014, and the direction of that is towards stronger mainstream offers and earlier help. I think it's also worth highlighting as well that the expert hand funding is genuinely encouraging. And I think a clear it's clear that a great deal of careful thought is already going into ensuring that we translate the reforms that are coming from national government down into a way that will work best for the people of Leicestershire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd open the floor to members now. Yeah, Mr. Poland.
Thank you. Do we know how many EHCPs there currently are in Leicestershire, and how many of those would likely become individual support plans? And again, for a layman, what's sort of the main differences between what an if you've got a student that's got an EHCP now that might be looking at an ISP, what notice would they and their parents notice? What differences would they notice?
If I start, I'll hand over to Liv for some of the detail. We've currently got in excess of 9,000 EHCPs in the county, and it's growing exponentially, particularly because of nervousness around what the reforms mean for families. What the government's been clear about is that none of the current EHCPs will cease at the moment. That may change as part of the consultation process, but that's currently what's being said. I think it's fair to say the criteria for the new ISPs, unless Liv has heard differently in the last couple of minutes, has not been made absolutely clear, and there's work going on nationally to agree what inclusion standards are and which needs will be met in mainstream schools, with the additional experts at hand support as well. I'd also say that EHCPs will be reserved for those attending the most complex needs, attending special schools. So in other words, those children and people who will be in mainstream schools, by and large, will not have an EHCP going forward. But I'll hand over to Liv now for some more of the detail.
Thanks, Tim. Just to echo what Tim was saying, I think the main difference between an EHCP and an ISP, an EHCP is local authority owned in essence. So we run the kind of the needs assessment, and we're responsible for the funding of that. An ISP would be governed by the school or the provision that they're attending. So that's the kind of main difference. And like Tim said, the children that are accessing mainstream will, under the new consultation, will no longer be eligible for an EHCP. So they will be governed by a school ISP.
Have Dr. North.
Thank you, Chair. Liv, you answered my question for me, so I'll pass over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Galton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, some of my questions have just been answered in what the officers have said. So I think that if you've already got one, you'll be allowed to keep it and run through the system right the way through, but it won't be removed. I think that's really important to reassure parents that have got them. And then secondly, under the arrangements at the moment, then if you haven't got an ECHP, the school has to fund, don't they, so much support. It used to be 6,000, but it may have gone up with inflation. And then if you went beyond that, then you had to get an ECHP to get more. And just could you explain how that will change in terms of the county council's responsibilities? And then finally, what will be the situation with appeals? Because there are so many appeals, aren't there now? If you can't get an EHCP or you can't get what you want in it, you go to independent appeal. Will there be appeal mechanisms for those earlier stages that will be run by the schools, and who will be running those? What will be our role in that? That's a critical question. Thank you.
Thank you. No, some really good points there. So you're quite right, the funding will change. I'm not sure anybody quite knows how it's going to change yet. The current funding arrangements are that there are three parts to funding a pupil with an EHCP in schools or in an alternative provision. You have the AWPU, which is the aid-weighted pupil unit for a child. Then you have the notional SEM budget, which you're quite right is £6,000 and hasn't changed since it was introduced. And then you have element 3, which is the top up, which we pay from the high needs block, which is in order to meet the individual needs of a child. What is clear is that the government would like to be passporting more funding through directly to schools. However, the exact arrangements of that aren't yet known, and I think that's still to be worked through as part of the reforms. But Again, we'll be keeping a close eye on that because that has implications for us here locally as well as nationally. In terms of the appeals process, if a parent wants to appeal the content of an EHCP, or indeed the decision by a council not to issue an EHCP, they go through the first tier SCND tribunal process. The proposals aren't to remove that process, but they are to say that the tribunal process can only make recommendations and refer it back to the local authority in order to reconsider the decision. So they won't be able to have binding agreements that they currently do. So it's difficult to know what the implications are going to be in terms of numbers, but you're right. Across the country, there are significant numbers of tribunals. And similarly, we have a number. We try and prevent the need to go to tribunal, but sometimes professionals don't agree with the families, with what a family is requesting. I think it's quite right that we have those balance and checks in the process.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just come back then on so if you haven't in the new system, if you don't have an ECHP and you're in one of the other that you explained, can you appeal? Will you be able to still appeal those?
It doesn't appear so at the current time, but I don't know yet.
Right.
That's a really good point, though. So if you have an ISP, I suspect there'll be some process, but I'm not sure. Liv, are you aware of anything?
So I think what they've alluded to at the moment it would be through the usual school complaint route. So it would be following the usual school complaint route, escalating to Ofsted if needed, but it wouldn't be there wouldn't be an opportunity through the tier tribunal.
And then finally, you mentioned that you expect more funding to be delegated to schools. Do you think that will still come through the system as we understand it? So it will still come here in our block, in the high needs block, as part of the overall schools budget, and then we'll just passport it to schools, or do you think they'll get it direct from DFE?
To be honest, I don't know yet, actually, because there's a number of different mechanisms they could do it. They could wrap it up as part of the schools block funding, or they could have a formula allocation system as they do currently with some of the funding that we receive, or it could be that the schools forum agrees the mechanism to passport it through, but there's no clarity around that yet.
Thank you very much. And if I could just ask a very quick follow-on question to that before I go back to members. Obviously, one of the frustrations, speaking to schools and being a governor of a school previously, is that you can provide the same level of provision as another school, yet the funding was different because you have funding models which isn't equitable. So one school delivers the same service, very similar a child, but you'll get a different amount per child. It wasn't a universal amount. And that was a huge point of frustration for teachers. Is this going to be an opportunity to maybe look at that and reset that and make it more fair? So regardless of what school or what part of the county you're in, you are getting the same funding for a similar level of need. Thank you.
That's quite a complex question to answer, but currently we are the 5th lowest funded authority in the country per high needs pupil, which means we're already at a disadvantage. So a child who goes to a Leicester City school will get significantly more funding than a child that goes to a Leicestershire County Council school. Again, there are a number of different ways they could fund that, and I think what you're also referring to is some of the fairer funding arrangements that have been talked about over a number of years, and a lot of those formulas are locked in, and it will take something like 25 years for them to work through the system. So we work with F40, which is the 40 lowest funded authorities, of which we are one, in order to campaign and campaign for more funding for Leicestershire. I would like to think that there'll be reconsideration of the high needs allocation that's going to happen, but again, I think it's unclear at this point.
Thank you very much, and apologies to members for jumping in there. Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you. After years and years of looking for this, we are kind of going in the right direction, but there's so much uncertainty. I'm not going to stop holding my breath yet that it works out. Just a few points about the expert at hand model. Just really some more detail about, are we working towards that? Are we setting that up already? And also, there's funding noted in there to set that up. So what we've done with that funding that we've received in this year, the 26-27 financial year, and what our plans are going for the next 2 to 3 years. So just a bit more about that. My second point is obviously the deficit. We're sitting at 100 million at the minute, aren't we? So at the end of this financial year, and are we concerned about the demand outstripping before the reforms come in? And we're just going to end up in a really, really dark place before the reforms actually come in, because they are going to be a slow burner. They're not coming in overnight. So I think there is real concerns about their ability to keep maintaining this high needs block as well. And then just obviously the model is pushing towards schools, and members have already raised that about more in mainstream school. And I just wonder about the schools I've spoken to in the past are stretched to breaking point. So putting more and more pressure on mainstream schools without the correct funding or support, are our schools going to cope with that? And I suppose, what are we doing with them, with the schools at the moment, to prepare them, and what support can we offer? But I think the bottom line will be about funding, because if they've got correctly funding, they've got the staff, they can cope. But if they're like they are now, they're just going to fall over. And I suppose, what are we doing to get the schools that we work with ready for these new reforms coming in? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll pick up the schools stretched and the deficit. I'm sure Liv will want to pick up the experts at hand. So in terms of the deficit, we were forecasting at the end of last year, £117 million deficit, cumulative deficit. We've managed to reduce that down to 99 million, which I think is a real success story for us here locally. As part of the reforms, the government is saying that they will refund us 90% of our net DSG deficit. So what that means is that we may have a deficit on the high needs block, but we may have a surplus on the early years block. So they are saying that they will currently refund what the net difference is on that. The actual arrangements aren't clear, because they seem to change reasonably regularly, or further clarities produced on a day-to-day basis. So that's a challenge that we're currently grappling with. That said, I think the reforms generally are the right ones. They're going in the right direction, so I have no criticism of that. Like you, I do have concerns about the timing and the implementation period, which is just too long to my mind. So we need to be really mindful about that. But our whole approach, and our experts at hands approach, is to build capacity for mainstream schools. And that's some brilliant work that Liv and colleagues have been doing in order to address that. So I'll hand to Liv to talk through our current thinking in that area.
Thank you. So the experts at hand model, we were really keen to start with what's going to make the biggest difference. So we did a lot of engagement events with our schools, our early years providers and our post-16 providers to really understand where the gaps of confidence was in our mainstream sector, and what we could do as local authorities and health to bolster those gaps and to fill those gaps over the next 2.5 years. So our model is incorporating all of those initial views and those conversations. We've held significant amount of workshops over the last few weeks, which has been really helpful. I think it's fair to say we've been hindered by the timeframes that we've been set as local authorities, but we've worked within those constraints, I think, really successfully with our partners within the mainstream sector particularly. The funding is for this financial year, however it's dependent on the plan that we're writing at the moment. So we don't want, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation that we're battling with at the moment. So we've come up with a plan, and we've got some initial feedback, which we're working with partners to kind of iterate over the next few weeks. And as colleagues have said, that's due for the middle of June. So the funding, we're working on the assumption that we get the full funding that we've been allocated, and we've planned in accordance with that. But that does affect the timeframes that we're having to deliver in. We are expected to do quarterly returns back to the Department for Education in terms of how we've spent the money and the impact that it's had. So we're trying to build in all of those impact measures. The first quarterly return is September, and obviously, as we've heard, schools are back into the realm of it in September. So we're limited slightly in the timeframes that we've got, but we're really pushing forward as much as we can.
Thank you. Mr. Piper.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got a couple of points. One is again about these sets of initials. I've got my head around what a DHCP is, but I didn't understand at the time when it was mentioned what that had to do with an internet service provider. Is it possible at all that there is a list of these abbreviations that could be circulated to members? Because some of us are a little bit slow on the uptake, and I'm not the only one by the looks of the nodding donkeys down the road. Having just learned what a NEAT is as well, I think that's a new one, isn't it? The other thing is, I mean, I think that the reports that come out of officers in general are very detailed and very colourful and have a very good appearance to the eye. And talking about the comment that you've just made there about making quarterly reports to the government, I fear how much of officers' time is actually taking up writing about what they're doing rather than actually being able to do what they're doing. And I do understand that there is a reason why we do need to have these reports, so that people like us know what you're doing. But I just, as personal comment, I actually do find that is a draw on resources I would like to see reduced to allow you to get on and do the job, really. So no question, I think there, was it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any comments or? No. Okay, yeah, it's Dr. North.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'll take an apology for the donkey comment later. You're in trouble, Mr. Bible. I do agree, though, the acronyms could be explained even at the start of a report. If you just explain it the very first time, then it's a given throughout the report. Couple of questions, so bear with me while I go through them, please. An ISP, have we got any idea what an approximate cost of that would be? And how does that value compare to EHCPs, please? I know you said currently, I think you had 9,000 plus maybe people with EHCPs. It would be really interesting to understand and evaluate at some point how many of those current EHCPs could fit into an ISP upon review, because that may be some forward planning. Also, can you, and I know this is hard, but I think it's a valid question that my constituents will ask me. Can you provide evidence that reducing the reliance on EHCPs will improve the outcomes for children rather than it being seen as a cost-cutting exercise? And I think that's an important question to answer. I'll give you those for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so a couple of comments, I suppose. The cost of an ISP, I don't know yet, because I don't think it'll be costed in the same way as an EHCP is, because the money will go straight to schools for them to resource it as they need to. But we don't have that detail yet, so it's very difficult to know. In terms of the numbers of EHCPs that would be an ISP now, based on the criteria that's outlined, it will just be those in a special school of whatever description that is. So that's very easy to look at in terms of the numbers of children we've got in special schools. So that doesn't need a big piece of work.
Sorry, Tim, do you know that number by any chance?
I'm just trying to think of, Liv, do you know off the top of your head?
At any given time, it's usually around a 60-40% split. So 60% within our mainstream sector and 40% within our specialist. And they have the reliance, sorry, what was it? Oh, the quality of education and the outcomes. Again, I can't comment on that at this point because we don't know what the ISP criteria is going to be. What I would say is that children, young people generally who have an EHCP out and are in mainstream school do better academically, but children with an EHCP in a special school the reports would indicate they do better socially. So that's the dynamic you're always grappling with in terms of the trade-off, I suppose, really. But what we do know in Leicestershire is that outcomes for children and young people with EHCPs are really good, actually. So that's a real credit to our schools, I think, across the system.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim, for that. Okay, I suppose we don't know how much an ISP costs. I think you've got a rough idea how much an EHCP assessment on its own costs, not the one that's always awarded, because that can be different per child, I understand. So maybe that would be a good figure if you could kind of keep that in your mind, and please provide us some information on that, and even with current funding allocation for that. One thing I'm worried about, I really agree with more mainstream inclusion. I suppose if you said this to me 15 years ago, without the multi-academy trusts, there wouldn't be a postcode lottery in schools, because currently that is an issue. People buy houses in certain areas for certain schools, and that leaves the most deprived again. So again, you've got a roundabout issue demographically of not supporting the most vulnerable and those who need it. So multi-academy trusts as well, I mean, it is a complete postcode lottery. You have some that are singular trusts, you have some that I think are still fighting to be council maintained, and then you've got some real big giants with their own educational psychologists that they don't always utilise. I understand roughly, and I'm working with approximate figures here, it's about £6,000 to keep a child in mainstream education, up to another £6,000 with SEN needs. That's £12,000 already. And I'm worried with the mainstream inclusion and the MATs or the schools being able to really own and govern this, that we won't have more of an issue on elective home education, because I think you're going to find some people that aren't getting on with the schools for whatever reason, or that school is not catering for their child and their needs. However, they may not be in an area where they can go to a specialist provision, and they are stuck where they are. And you've got people that are literally giving up their day jobs to accommodate these things because they've got children in tears every day, refusing to go to school. And I think what really bothers me about the inclusion, at what point would we consider the mainstream inclusion strategy unsuccessful, and what measurable indicators will trigger a review? Because I think that's really important that we have that data and information ongoing. Thank you.
There's some really good points there, actually. I mean, I have a number of worries as well. Operating a dual system is complex, and the overlaid, I think, with all the changes that we're facing across not just education, but also across children's social care all at the same time. You're quite right. The age-weighted pupil unit for a secondary school is a little over £6,000, and the notional budget is around £6,000, and then the top up is whatever the HCP determines that to be. I'm not sure what the review process will be, other than going through the school's complaints process for the new ISP yet. What we are said and have said in our responses to the DFE is that if you're going to introduce this type of system, you need to make sure that we have checks and balances, and you give local authority the powers in order to intervene where this is not working effectively. Of course, you're quite right around postcode lottery. Children, young people we have to abide by the emissions code, and by and large, emissions criteria is around straight line distance. So those can afford to buy houses in particular areas do that, and then we'll get the school of their choice. Those that can't afford to will struggle with that as well. We are expecting a revised admissions code, and I'm hoping that some of those issues will be addressed. But it's a thorny issue that's been around for a long time. We do mitigate that locally by having what we call fair access panels, so we can compel schools to take children who wouldn't ordinarily be allocated that particular school. But again, it's something we need to watch, and we are pushing that on really quite hard, because I am worried about it too.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tim, for that response. I suppose some of my constituents have reached out to me already about concerns over their own children in care. I've had a story or a situation where there has been someone where the inclusion service has failed that person. They were excluded from school and didn't get any alternative education needs. Subsequently, he has turned to a life of crime, and then becomes a statistic and a problem with adult social care and continuity. So these people actually end up costing the council a lot of money, because we're not putting these safeguards in place, that we're missing some of this population already. And I appreciate, I've heard people from the Youth Justice Programme and other programmes which are amazing and very successful. But I feel this postcode lottery will really create that issue even further. And I think if it goes to mainstream jurisdiction, we have to find another escalation route other than the school's complaint process personally, because that's already failing a lot of my constituents. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll watch this space really with what the escalation process will be. It's certainly something which we are raising regularly, isn't it, Liv, with our DfE advisors at the moment.
And just in terms of that postcode lottery, that's something we've been really aware of when we're designing the experts at hand model. So we've approached it in a locality model because actually we're very aware schools and families in one area's needs might be very different to in another area. So we've tried to build our experts at hand model on a locality model to make sure that we're supporting a locality in the best possible way. And you know, it's not an overarching response. Which schools have fed back really positively about, and I think we're really keen to make sure that there's got that equity. So there isn't schools that are good for send. Every school is good for send, and that through our experts at hand model, we're hoping to increase confidence, and we've built some really measurable KPIs to help monitor where we are with that as well over the next few months.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry, it was just because I just wanted to feedback because I appreciate standardisation and I appreciate trying to have an elective model that you can implement across schools to maintain some structure, but this is still failing individuals and we are having other issues across other services where this is expanded into. So I just think I would appreciate a bit more scope on that through these meetings, just to say, look, we understand the backlash of this. If this goes wrong, this is the impact on us as well. And I think some of that awareness in these meetings would be really helpful because at least I can go back to my constituents and explain that other things are still in review. These aren't closed doors. We're not saying just go to the complaints process. I think there should be more of an open service where they can reach out to within the council. I mean, the funding's there, it's allocated to get those kids educated, and you know, some people are slipping through the net on that. Maybe we need to reevaluate a lot, and I appreciate there's bureaucracy and legal restraints, but maybe there is something interim we could do a bit better, maybe, just as a thought. Thank you. Sorry, Jim.
You're welcome. Perfect. Miss Penderbury,
Thank you, Chair. Pretty much what others have been saying, and I certainly welcome stronger mainstream support as long as it isn't to the detriment of or the provision of specialist schools. Given that experts within the school will lead to a dramatic increase in the need across the country, are there going to be enough qualified staff to provide speech and language, occupational health, psychologists and whatever? Because we are going to see a dramatic increase if they've got to go into each and every school rather than a dedicated one place.
Completely agree. It's a really valuable concern. I think it's one that we share as well. Having the funding is one thing, getting the workforce is a complete other, because everyone in the country has got the same pot of money to recruit from the same pool. It's a real concern for us and one that we're working through as a partnership. One thing I will say across the board, Leicestershire is a really appealing local area to work for. We tend not to struggle recruiting specialists, and we've over the last few years built up a really good pool of locums as well to dip into, especially for speech and language and educational psychology as well. But it is something we've fed back to the DfE. It is one of our biggest concerns with the reforms particularly.
I think the other point worth making is that we, as part of our outreach work through Oakfield Short Stay School, we had already started implementing a very similar model to Experts at Hand. So we've already recruited to a number of these posts. So we got there first, really, which was great.
Thank you. That's really good to hear. Just one other thing, and it is just purely a point that makes me wince a little bit. When we talk about standardised care, SEND can't be standardised in any meaningful way, as each child is very much an individual, and it just makes me wince a little bit when we say standardised care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that the sort of overriding comment I think I've been listening to and so want to ask maybe a question at the end maybe is around the fact that I doubt if any of us went into one of our local schools in our area, not one of them could say every single child was in the right place at the moment in time. They're having to accommodate children with varying needs and they're overwhelmed often. And I know that's the case with the 2 or 3 schools I speak to regularly. And my worry is by this change and by prioritising mainstream provision, you're only going to overburden that. And the deficits a lot of these schools are currently running, that isn't taken into account with this additional funding. That funding is meant to doesn't solve that problem. I think that's my overriding. And how do we balance that with a lot of these schools, if they're not in deficit budget already, they're running close to it. How do we support those schools trying to find this extra provision when they're already struggling to meet the requirement as it is? So yeah.
I completely agree. I am very worried about the funding levels that Leicestershire schools receive, and we'll have to keep campaigning on that one particularly. We have a number of different processes through our inclusion service and other officers where we engage with schools to support them, providing high support, high challenge in order to make sure they're providing them the highest quality of education for children, particularly those who are more vulnerable as well. I think it's probably worth just mentioning, actually, whilst we've been in the meeting, I'm really pleased actually that 3 years ago we were inspected and there was a number of areas where we were found to be inadequate. We've been on an accelerated progress plan for 3 years, and that's been lifted today in recognition of the amazing progress that we've made. So that's a really positive outcome, and it reflects the hard work of, I think, of the teams generally and the whole system in coming together to address those concerns. So it's a really good news story for us today.
Yeah, and huge congratulations to everyone involved, all the officers especially. You know, you work night and day, literally night and day to make this happen. So yeah, congratulations. That's a real achievement. Thank you very much. We're coming on now to our final substantive item, and that's item number 14, which is Q4 performance report. Sharon and Tim, I think you're both presenting this one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is the regular report that the committee receives on our performance, reporting on the previous quarter prior to the meeting. So it follows the format that members will hopefully be used to. For noting on paragraph 5, it says that 9 of the measures that we report against have a national benchmark. 2 of those for Leicestershire are in the top quartile, 4 are in the second, 2 in the third, and 1 is in the bottom quartile. So it shows for that quarter against those that are national benchmarked where we sit. Over the page, if I take you through the social care and targeted family help performance, and then Tim, I'll hand over to Tim to take you through some of the education performance. Of the areas that we report against in paragraph 9, it's the percentage of children who become subject to a child protection plan for a second or subsequent time. So you'll see that there was an increase in that, a slight increase for the quarter, but an explanation has been given there about the number of children, the auditing we do to understand the circumstances for those children, and a positive note, although we wouldn't want any child to have a second or subsequent period of child protection planning if possible, but a positive note is that the overarching findings from audit are that these are not children that are going on a plan, coming off and very quickly going back on a plan again. These are children that it's usually beyond 12 months, 2 years that have gone back on a plan, and the primary concerns are children living with domestic abuse, parental mental health, and parental substance misuse, and the chaotic lifestyle that goes with some of those things. But to reassure, it's an area that we audit for every child that happens, so we've got a proper understanding of that work. Paragraph 10 takes you through children where there's been a re-referral to children's social care, and again that there's been a slight increase in that. in this quarter. We are, as part of the Family First programme work, partnership programme work, we've looked at the forms into the service, and we've looked at a closer co-working between our targeted family help front door and our front door into social care, to make sure that we are not diverting children to family help, targeted family help rather, for them to immediately come back into social care and that be a re-referral. We're looking at that process because we think some of those figures are being increased because of that process. So that is further work that's being done. Positive things around the number of assessments completed within 45 days. And as always, our figures and performance against our care leavers in suitable accommodation, education, employment, training, and in contact with us are positive. And you'll note that at the end of this quarter, our care leavers in education, employment and training was slightly higher than is in the corporate parenting strategy. And that's because those figures are a moment in time, but that shows the focus of the work. In paragraph 14, we've split this performance down. At a previous panel of committee, we were asked around the dental and health checks and the ages of the children. So in paragraph 14, we've tried to give the up to age 13 and above to evidence some of that performance and some of what sits behind those percentages, and the work we're doing along with carers, our youngsters and with health colleagues to make sure that we continue to improve that figure. So I think that covers most for social care and targeted family help. So if I hand over to Tim to take you through the early years and education, and then happy to take any questions at the end.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be reasonably brief because many of the issues that were in the report we've discussed already in previous items. But first of all, to say that in early years, take-up of funded early years childcare has improved for 2-year-olds, but dips slightly for 3-year-olds, although that's not a concern at the moment because you do get the spikes throughout the year anyway. With overall participation in high quality provision remaining really strong, and we've managed to expand our capacity in the county in order to meet the expanded childcare offer, which is really good news. At secondary school level, attainment continues to improve. Overall performance is now marginally above the national average, although outcomes for disadvantaged remains below national benchmarks. But encouragingly, as I've already referenced, the SEND performance has improved, particularly those with EHCPs, which are now above the national, which is really good news. I've already talked about EHE, so I won't go through that again, but I think the report generally reflects a system managing rising complexity and demand with strong performance in several areas, but there are clear SEND pressures around inclusion and school engagement, and that's what we need to have our sustained focus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything from you, Mr. Pudsey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm conscious of time, so I won't add much. I just want to say quite briefly that I am glad to see that audit work has already been undertaken regarding the repeat referrals figure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. North.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, a lot of work has gone into this. Really commend the staff. I think it's really informative. Couple of questions. I'll just ask them and please answer as you feel comfortable. Repeat referrals remain amongst the worst performing indicators from what I can see in the report. How many of those cases involve families previously known to the service where intervention failed to produce a lasting improvement? Please, that's the first one.
I don't have the exact figure for that information. Most of those re-referrals, when we audit, and a recent audit's been done, are children that have come in, have been referred to us. We may have agreed that that goes into targeted family help, and then they come back into the service into social care because there are other issues that come to light. But we can look at that. But our auditing is not showing, for instance, that these are children where we've provided a long-term piece of work to, closed our involvement, and then they've come back quickly. Obviously, some families do need to come back to us at some points in time, and that some of that is, we wouldn't want that to happen often, but sometimes that's appropriate. Sometimes there are families where there's a level of need that periodically they do need to come back to us for us to provide another service.
Thank you, Sharon. Just to continue as well, I think it's really important to understand what percentage of repeat referrals involve the same social worker or team or locality, because I think when you look at repeat referrals, something's broken or something hasn't worked first time round. Sometimes you need the continuity of someone who understands the case, knows the case, can move on with it. I think those are stats that I'd really be interested in. If you don't have them, would you please get them?
Yeah, our referrals all come into the front door, so all come into first response. So a referral would always come in there, as in the people that are taking that repeat referral. We would need to break that down further. If I understand what you're saying, is if that family had received an assessment, there was a long-term piece of work, and at that point things have not worked out, it's been closed and they've come back, but our audit is not showing that that is a model. The other thing to mention is the whole ethos of the Family First programme is around a worker staying with the family throughout the process. So our models that we're piloting at the moment are against having a team that do the assessments and handing over at various points to different teams. That comes with some challenges, but that's something that part of Family First is looking at.
If I could just add, I think my understanding of your point was how we make best use of established relationships with families. So if a referral comes back in within 3 months of it having been closed, it actually bypasses our front door and goes straight back to the team that might have known that family, who worked with that family previously, so that it might be that a phone call or a conversation to review what might have gone wrong can take place. So they're trying to sustain those relationships in those few that come in sort of quite quickly. So they're not the majority, but if it happens, we have got that process in place. So retaining relationships.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. It was just because I wanted to understand the effectiveness of the service, because referrals were so high. I just wanted to understand what had gone wrong, but maybe, I'm quite happy if you want to take that offline, get me some more data. I'd just be interested to see that, because surely that's a KPI performance indicator, key performance indicator, Bill, of either improvement or target setting then for the department, which would be interesting. Thank you.
It's just to reassure, when Ofsted come in and inspectors, and they were in during the JTI in December, they're very positive about the robustness of our referrals, our assessments, and identifying need. But it most definitely is an area that we scrutinise as part of performance, and happy to take some time outside of committee to explain the robust oversight that we have of that performance, and looking at auditing and the oversight of planning and signing off when we're involved or no longer going to be involved with a family. It's not one individual that makes that decision. So if some of that information to reassure around that robustness would be helpful, happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. I'd really appreciate that. I just think sometimes when you have an opportunity to improve. It may even be that we got it wrong. Maybe we didn't advise correctly the first time or something else. But those are really, really good, lessons learned, and then identify training gaps. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Poland.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Looking at paragraph 32 on page 108, which talks about permanent exclusions from Leicestershire schools. It says that a staggering 400% higher now than it was in 2018, 2019, with 19 permanent exclusions in 2018, 2019, and 94 in 24-25. So my question, I guess, is why is there such a massive increase? That's the question. And I noticed that COVID is during the middle of that time. Does that have an impact on it? But I'm it's just amazing that it's that big an increase in a pretty short period of time.
Yeah, no, really good point. I mean, I think what you're seeing there is a system under pressure, absolutely. And we've talked about the funding issues for schools generally, and that makes it trickier. COVID has no doubt it has absolutely had an impact. It really has escalated that. We're not an outlier. This is a national trend, and that's not an excuse. It's just the reality of you often see peaks and troughs in exclusions, and we have mirrored the national changes over a number of years. Our response has been actually part of the reason for setting up our outreach service from the Oakfield School was in order to address those particular concerns, to provide speech and language, looking at all of the key issues, particularly we're worried about. So that's been our response, and so far the impact has been pleasing. I want to see it run for a year before I start celebrating anyway, but it is providing some positive outcomes, and I think the experts at hand work will go further to help that and mitigate it. We've seen a huge issue around the availability of alternative provision as well. So we've had a project going on over the last year to bring online more alternative provision for those children who need something a little bit different. And that project's been really successful. But again, we'll look at the impact of that after it's been running for a year or so. But I think we've had some positive responses to what's a national problem.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I was without sort of offering a value judgment on. So there you could look at it and go, did we not exclude people we should have been excluding in 2018 or 2019, or are we excluding far too many in 24, 25? As a schools many decades ago now, but I remember then that you only need one or two disruptive pupils to sort of really damage other people's education. So we don't want to be keeping people in class that are that disruptive and causing problems, but equally we don't want to be excluding people permanently and damaging their life chances too easily.
No, I completely agree. I think even one exclusion is one too many. It's about how we can look at the context of each exclusion, and we do need to look at the way the curriculum's delivered, so it can cater for a child with different needs, and generally doesn't at the moment to the extent it needs to. The way we deliver education in this country and most of the world actually, it hasn't changed since Victorian times, and so we are doing a lot of work around something called universal design for learning, which is making sure that it is responsive to the needs of the child, because we need to make sure that schools can deliver to a classroom which may have 30-40% of children with additional needs. So it's a very different context, but you're quite right to raise it, so thank you.
And just on that, I'm again talking about ex-life as a governor, and Miss City, you're a governor too, aren't you? Sitting on the panels which decide these, they are hugely complex and often like eye-opening. The things that have been happening over a sustained period of time, they're not an easy thing, and I think it's again a really difficult challenge for schools to face that. So it's a really good point. Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you. Just a few points. Just paragraphs 9 and 10. Obviously, you have covered them and said they're being audited, but we're way over the target. I feel like every time we come here, you're sort of repeating exactly the same thing. So I suppose, do we have to is this acceptable? Do we sit here and say this is acceptable, or what more should we be doing to stop these repeat child protection plans and the re-referrals? Because I think we're just in the cycle of coming back every performance saying exactly the same thing, and we're not not moving anywhere. So that's my first point. Paragraph 17 and 18 I was going to pick up, but I think, Tim, you've quite covered them off, so I'll leave them. And then just paragraph 29, there's talk there about getting pupils back into school from elected home education. So I'd just be interested about what you're using to encourage those families to put their children back in school. What more can we do to do more of that? So what's working well in securing those pupils back into school that you've identified in that paragraph 29? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. In relation to the repeat child protection plans, we are commissioning and doing more training around domestic abuse, because the overriding reason for a period of replanning tends to be where there has been domestic abuse, parental substance misuse, or parental mental health, but domestic abuse is one of the key factors. We are looking at more training with staff to think of a different approach to that. And that doesn't mean that if we consider that there is a real safeguarding risk to that child, that we would massage a figure by not taking a child that needs to go and be on a plan. We most definitely will do that. There has been a rise in repeat child protection plans across nationally, but that doesn't mean that it's not still an area for us. So our approach is to do even more training and work around domestic abuse, and whether there are other ways and better ways for us to support with a robust plan that doesn't need to be a child protection plan. So that is work that we are focusing on. In relation to the percentage of re-referrals, we do at times get that figure down. There is an issue at the moment that we are exploring. We think the work that we've done about the form and how the teams work together at that front door will address some of that. But we need to see that that is the case and monitor that. Yeah.
So in terms of EHC children returning to school, it's a range of different measures actually. School attendance orders does help in some circumstances. As I said earlier, we've also set up a range of different alternative provision for children. So there's packages of support which cater for those individual needs rather than for a whole classroom are working well. And we've recently reviewed our fair access arrangements for schools so children can get back into school much more quickly and easily, with clauses, for example, if a child has left a particular school within a certain amount of time, they should return to the same school. So it's working through those issues. And then looking at some really effective reintegration packages for children and young people, particularly addressing mental health issues or worries about bullying and so on.
Hate to mention football in this environment, but I remember 4 years ago, is it a 4 years World Cup? We had a huge spike. You just mentioned domestic abuse, and we had a massive spike during the World Cup. The new World Cup, next World Cup's due to start in under 2 weeks, I understand. So have we got any plans in place about how we're going to deal with possible lots of referrals or lots of concerned people ringing up? Because it will happen, I think, where alcohol is involved and stuff. So have we got a plan in place? Apart from wearing an England top.
And praying that they win. We haven't got a strategic plan in place around the World Cup, but we know at times when there are likely to be increased referrals, and our service at the front door is flexible to flex against that. So we're working very closely with the police around domestic abuse and looking at those incidents that come in. But I think that is probably all we can do at this stage, but be mindful, as we are, we heard earlier in the meeting, at the end of school terms, we know there are lots more referrals that come in. So we have a service that prepares itself for such information.
Thank you very much. So yeah, there's no other urgent items I agreed to take earlier. So I'd just like to remind everyone of the date of the next meeting, which is on the 1st of September at 2:00. So I wish you all a very lovely summer, and thank you very much for today's meeting. Thank you.